Welcome to today's Catholic Daily Readings from Christus Dominus Bread of Life. A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Colossians. Therefore, just as you have received the Lord Jesus Christ, walk in him, having been rooted and being built up in him, and having been confirmed in the faith which you have learned, abounding in him with thanksgiving. See to it that no one deceives you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the traditions of men, according to the elements of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him is located all the fullness of the divine nature bodily. And you have been filled by him, who is the head of all principality and power. In him you have been circumcised with a circumcision not made by hand, not by despoiling the body of flesh, but by the circumcision of Christ. You have been buried with him in baptism, in whom you have also risen again through faith in the works of God, who raised him up from the dead. And when you were dead in your transgressions and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, he enlivened you together with him, forgiving you of all transgressions, erasing the handwriting of the decree which was opposed to us, and he has taken this away from your midst, affixing it to the cross. And so, despoiling principalities and powers, he has led them away confidently and openly, triumphing over them in himself.
The Lord is compassionate toward all his works. His mercy is forever. His kindness never ends. The Lord is compassionate toward all his works. Let all creation praise the King of I will bless you, O God, my King. I will praise your name forever. Every day I will sing your glory. Every day I will lift your praise. The Lord is compassionate toward all his works. His mercy is forever. His kindness never ends. The Lord is compassionate toward all his works. Let all creation praise the King of heaven. The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in love. He is good to all, his care extends. Compassion covers everything he made. Let every word give thanks to the Lord. Let the faithful proclaim his reign. His kingdom is everlasting light. His might is the hope of the world. The Lord is compassionate toward all his works. His mercy is forever. His kindness never ends. The Lord is compassionate toward all his works.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Now it happened that, in those days, he went out to a mountain to pray, and he was spending the night in the prayer of God. And when daylight had arrived, he called his disciples. And he chose 12 from among them, whom he also called apostles: Simon, whom he also named Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James of Alphaeus, and Simon who is called the Zealot, and Judas of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. And descending with them, he stood in a level place with a multitude of his disciples, and a copious multitude of people from all of Judea and Jerusalem and the coastal region, and Tyre and Sidon, who had come so that they might hear him and might be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled by unclean spirits were cured, and the entire crowd was trying to touch him, for power went out from him and healed all. Join us for today's reflection. The slave ships arrived at Cartagena's harbor carrying human cargo that had survived the Middle Passage, barely. By the time these vessels reached Colombia's coast, the holds reeked of death, disease, and human waste. Most decent people avoided the docks during these arrivals. The smell alone was enough to drive away anyone with options. Peter Claver ran toward what others fled from. For 40 years, this Spanish Jesuit made it his mission to be the first person to greet newly arrived African slaves with dignity, medical care, and the message that they possessed infinite worth in God's eyes. He baptized over 300,000 enslaved people, nursed the sick, buried the dead, and learned enough African dialects to communicate directly with people who had been stripped of everything else. What made his ministry extraordinary wasn't just its scope, but its location. Claver deliberately positioned himself at the exact intersection of human evil and divine mercy. The slave trade represented organized cruelty on an industrial scale, where humans were reduced to property and profit margins. Into this systematic dehumanization, Claver brought radical affirmation of human dignity that challenged every assumption underlying the economy that surrounded him. Paul's letter to the Colossians captures the theological foundation that made Claver's ministry possible. He reminds them that they have been rooted and built up in Christ, filled with divine fullness that makes them complete. This wasn't abstract doctrine for Claver, but practical truth that determined how he saw each person emerging from those slave ships. Regardless of their physical condition, legal status, or economic value, they carried the same divine image that demanded reverence. The principalities and powers that Paul describes Christ as triumphing over weren't just spiritual abstractions, but concrete systems of oppression. The slave trade operated through legal structures, economic incentives, and religious justifications that made cruelty appear normal and profitable. Claver's insistence on treating enslaved people as bearers of divine dignity represented direct confrontation with these powers, exposing their fundamental incompatibility with gospel truth. Luke's account of Jesus choosing the 12 apostles reveals similar divine logic at work. Jesus spent the entire night in prayer before selecting his inner circle, and his choices were surprising. Instead of recruiting from established religious leadership or political elites, he chose fishermen, tax collectors, and zealots, people whose qualifications for transforming the world were questionable by conventional standards. This pattern continues through Claver's calling. Nothing in his background suggested he would become the apostle to enslaved Africans. Born to Spanish farmers, educated in Jesuit schools, ordained as a priest, his trajectory seemed destined for conventional ministry among people who shared his language, culture, and social status. But divine purposes often redirect human plans toward assignments that exceed natural preferences and comfortable capabilities. The Psalm's declaration that the Lord is compassionate toward all his works wasn't theological theory for Claver but practical motivation for exhausting ministry. When others saw cargo to be processed efficiently, he saw God's image requiring urgent care. When economic logic demanded treating people as disposable resources, divine compassion demanded treating them as irreplaceable souls. His ministry challenged not just the slave trade, but the religious compromise that allowed it to flourish. Many Christians had found ways to reconcile gospel teaching with economic participation in human trafficking. They developed theological justifications for treating some people as property while maintaining spiritual devotion for themselves. Claver's radical service exposed the impossibility of loving God while participating in systematic cruelty toward God's image bearers. The crowds that came to Jesus for healing in Luke's Gospel experienced something similar to what enslaved Africans found in Claver's ministry. They encountered divine power that refused to be limited by social boundaries, economic calculations, or religious protocols. Jesus healed everyone who came seeking restoration, regardless of their ability to contribute anything valuable in return. Claver's baptisms of 300,000 people represented more than sacramental administration. Each baptism was a declaration that this person possessed eternal significance that no human system could diminish. In societies organized around slavery, these baptisms became acts of resistance, proclaiming truths about human worth that directly contradicted the legal and economic foundations of colonial life. The spiritual warfare that Paul describes in Colossians played out concretely in Claver's daily encounters with evil. The powers and principalities weren't abstract theological concepts, but actual structures that profited from human misery. His ministry represented practical demonstration that Christ's triumph over these forces was real and available to anyone willing to position themselves where divine mercy could confront human cruelty. Modern Christians face their own versions of the choice Claver confronted. Contemporary forms of systematic injustice create their own slave ships and harbors, where human dignity is compromised for economic advantage. The challenge is whether followers of Christ will position themselves where they can offer divine mercy to people trapped in these systems, or whether they'll maintain comfortable distance from situations that demand costly compassion. Claver's canonization as the Saint of the Slaves recognizes more than individual holiness. It affirms that Christian discipleship sometimes requires going to places where the gospel's demands become most uncomfortable for the surrounding culture. His feast reminds us that divine compassion toward all God's works isn't just a beautiful sentiment, but a practical call to ministry that refuses to respect the boundaries that human evil tries to establish.